Hello and welcome. I'm Jono Hayes and you're watching W News Extra, broadcasting live from the Arabiya headquarters. These are our top stories. President Trump urges restraint from Ukraine just as Russia floods the skies with drones, and peace talks remain at a standstill. Plus, a breakthrough in southern Syria as Druze leaders say they have reached a ceasefire agreement with the Syria military after days of deadly clashes and Israeli airstrikes. And following in the footsteps of his mother, Prince Harry visits a landmine charity in Angola. US President Donald Trump has said Ukraine should avoid striking Moscow as Russia unleashes one of its biggest drone attacks in months. Now entering its fifth year, the war shows no signs of slowing. 400 drones overnight, cities hit, and fresh warnings from the Kremlin. Peace talks seem to have stalled and Western weapons are now pouring in. This is far from a ceasefire. Where are we really standing and what is standing in the way of this? Now, earlier, I spoke to Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak. Take a listen to this.
Our president is holding talks and with Donald Trump. They're putting accent and highlight on the major points. And on the first place, Russia is not capable for ceasefire. Putin will not stop the war. And we need to make our partners to understand our key points, and we need to push on the sanctions, and we need to increase the number of weaponry supplied to Russia. We need long-range weapons, and because we need to shift the war also to the Russia's territory. Also, something has to be added. Russia will be able to stop when the cost of this war will be higher, because the continuing with this war is more profitable and beneficial for the Russia rather than stopping, and that from the point of their internal economics and also from the monies they are putting in this war and for servicing and this war, and brings them more profit. And when we will apply pressure to Putin's surrounding people, that is very important. And also, I would like our partners, Americans, to understand Russia is not considering USA as a potential partner. They are considering USA as an opponent or an enemy. They will not work with the USA, and they are interested to make the US look weaker and to damage their reputation say, President Trump. And Putin is putting his efforts a lot to do that.
To discuss this and all of today's stories, we're joined in the studio by the Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabry Picket, and columnist and correspondent Gemma White. Thank you both for joining us so much in the studio. We heard there from Mikhailo Podolyak, the advisor to the head of the Office of the President of the Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky. More drone attacks have obviously hit Ukraine, Michael. Proof that Trump's NATO deal is maybe not exactly having the impact instantly that we may have expected. It may take some time.
I think it's going to take a lot of time. I think that what's happening is definitely not scaring the Russians. I do think what would scare the Russians is if there was more of a concerted effort on the part of the US administration as well as the international community to come together to take the $300 billion of frozen Russian assets that are in G7 countries and then give that to the Ukrainians to figure out how they would like to spend that. That, I think, would have real repercussions. But issuing a deadline to a president who is a former member of the KGB, I don't think he's going to feel too threatened.
So the assets that are there, and I think they're saying that it could be at about $1 trillion by the time that they've seized as many assets as possible. 50 billion of that was given in a loan in 2024 from the G7 of the 325 billion that's there as well. But they're saying the issue is that you can't, there's cross-border investments that are part of this as well. It's difficult to establish which are you actually able to seize and which are you able to liquefy into actual cash. So tricky, but there's definitely 50 million that's been sent across as a loan temporarily to Ukraine.
And I think that when the Russians start looking at their overseas assets, if they could no longer include those in any bottom line, I think that that would have a real impact. The challenge that the US administration faces, and I'm going to try to be as fair as I possibly can, is that, remember, on the campaign trail, Donald Trump said that he would have this war solved in 24 hours. And if you look at the situation with the tariffs have changed. Tariffs, the amount that are going to be levied on certain countries, and the deadlines when they are going to be enacted, that's also shifted. So the Russians simply have to stand back and wait. And although there's that 48 days now, but the 50-day deadline, that was issued by Donald Trump. But that doesn't mean that Donald Trump isn't going to change his mind. And he isn't going to change the date, move it up or move it back. So in the Russians' point of view, all they have to do is wait and see. There doesn't seem to be a sense of urgency. And while all this is going on, we have incredibly nice summer weather, which works to the favor of the Russians as they're trying to work themselves deeper and deeper into Ukrainian territory.
And indeed, because we saw in 2023 the Ukrainian summer offensive, which was a disaster for Ukraine, really, and it went through the whole entire way from June until December, which was a huge loss for Ukraine. But we always hear of this summer offensive that can take place because it's favourable weather. Gemma, question to you on this as well. Do you think perhaps tougher tariffs are needed? Is that what's required, or more sanctions?
No, I agree with Michael. Putin can wait forever. His silence speaks volumes. He's not even bothering talking, which we discussed earlier. Trump ends up negotiating with himself, which is what will happen if he changes the dates. And I do think that flip-flopping on the dates or the times, it does look weak on the world stage. Putin is just waiting for Trump to make a mistake or to make more concessions, and he has shown he has the patience to do that.
There are some worrying scenes that are coming out of Ukraine as well. And this I want to show you just quickly. A video of a farmer taking what looks like missiles in his garden and arranging them. And that's the true reality for Ukrainians on the ground. I guess day to day we are seeing the civilians in Gaza, but we're rarely seeing the reality that is taking place for Ukrainian civilians, day-to-day life for Ukrainian civilians. This war has waged on for long enough, Michael, and we've seen very little in terms of action from the EU, yet it is dangerously close to EU territory, right? So a concern.
It has to be a concern. And I think that, you know, for people in North America, for someone like Donald Trump, he was not in Europe during the Second World War. And although that was 80 years ago, there are still memories that are so strong in the minds, it's in the DNA of most Europeans of what happened. And if you're having to go through what is now the longest European conflict since the Second World War, you're thinking of the worst possibilities. We have to remember that, you know, Finland shares a border with Russia, and it's not that far, and things have changed drastically there. Poland is also in a position where they're probably feeling quite vulnerable. And it's one of the reasons why there is such a concerted effort on the part of the European leaders to come together, is because they know if any leader who's going to be the aggressor is going to take a little bit and get away with it, then why wouldn't they continue to take a little bit more?
Gemma, what do you make of these videos that we're seeing on the screen of the farmer in the village? I believe this is close to where President Zelensky is actually from. And we're seeing these horrific scenes of what is now an everyday reality for Ukrainian civilians.
I think when you see that something like this has become commonplace, you know, he's almost casual about it, you know, so it has become a part of their lives for so many years now. I think we can only imagine how the Ukrainians are feeling, probably tired, run down, always kind of waiting for the next attack. And their politicians have actually been quite vocal in light of Trump's, 50-day extension to Putin. So the mayor of Kiev appeared on German television. He was asking what the delay was, why is this 50 days? He says the Russian attacks have become more intense. And then the Ukrainian MP, Kira Rudik, she called Trump's announcement bittersweet, but she also said 50 days gives Russia the chance to just kill more Ukrainians and launch more missiles. So I think there is a feeling that, well, we've kind of been left hung out to dry, really. It doesn't feel that there's much, even in light of the news about the Patriot missiles and EU countries, purchasing them on behalf of Ukraine. It doesn't seem like that's galvanized the country and made everyone suddenly feel really optimistic. It's just not there.
The mayor you mentioned of Kiev there, who is Viktor Klitschko, who is the former heavyweight boxer as well, which I was unaware of.
Yes.
He was operating as the mayor of Kiev. Michael, question is, what do Russia want? Does anyone really know the answer to that $1 million question? Because it has to end at some stage.
So analysts have said that what Russia wants is for the Ukrainians to have a cap on the size of their military, to give up more Ukrainian territory to the Russians, and also to vow never to join NATO. Now, if you're the Ukrainians and you've gone through these years of war, which one of those would you want to agree to, especially with a Russian president who's right on your border and is inching closer and closer? But that is what analysts have said is probably what the Russians are talking about with the Ukrainians. And I think that those are all bridges too far for the Ukrainians to concede to.
And indeed, it seems like it is just going to wage on and on and on. The 50 days, and again, when Michael mentioned it a while ago, Gemma, we don't think we're going to see any change in that. It would probably, if anything, just weaken the Trump administration to do something similar to that. Not a great ideal, and not a great narrative for the administration to do either. So you think it's going to stick at September the 2nd?
Yeah, I can't see him bringing it forward. Because I just don't even think they've got that much of a plan, to be honest. I don't think there's a concrete plan. I do think Trump sometimes throws out, okay, here's a timeline, but it doesn't seem to be like, well, we're going to achieve this by here and this by here and this by here. There's no cohesion there.
There seems to be no semblance between between both sides. Well, let's move on. Thank you both. Thank you, Michael and Gemma, for your thoughts on that. Let's move on to our next story. There may be a pause in the bloodshed in southern Syria. A senior Druze religious leader says a ceasefire has been reached with the Syrian government after 4 days of fierce clashes and Israeli strikes. The fighting in Sweden left dozens dead and prompted Israel to hit targets in Damascus, including Syria's military headquarters. Now, it's still unclear whether the truce will hold as tensions remain high across the region. First, to talk about this, Gemma, a real escalation in what has been a worrying conflict. The scary footage that we've seen today, right through from, I think, about 6 p.m. Local time here in the UAE today, we saw some terrifying footage coming out of Syria.
I think for most people, for the layperson, this has come out of nowhere. So much is happening already, and then suddenly this is happening as well, and you have to wonder if they're taking advantage of kind of global confusion. But we've gone from violent clashes at the weekend to a missile being launched at the Ministry of Defence. We've seen on air Israel have said that was the target. They were always aiming for that. The Syrian Health Ministry have said 28 people injured, 1 person killed. And the United States has also stepped in. Now, they've called the situation worrisome, which is quite euphemistic, really. Is it worrying, is it not? But apparently they've urged Israel to halt the airstrikes. And as we've seen, there is. But Damascus itself has said they hold Israel fully responsible, and that with regards to international law, they hold the right to retaliate. Now,
there is some footage that you'll see on our screens just a second ago. We'll circle back to that in a minute. But it is of the Arabiya headquarters in Damascus, which was hit and damaged earlier on. And this, I guess, hammers at home about just how close this is and how much of a reality this is for people on the ground in Syria. Now, Marco Rubio has just posted on X, just moments ago, all sides agreed to end the conflict by Wednesday night, and I'm not direct quoting there, loosely quoting what was said. So we've seen a truce already. Michael, this was on Tuesday night. Now here we are again with Rubio saying that we could see a ceasefire in agreement?
So we can hope that this is actually going to hold. But based on the track record of the Israelis and the initiative that they show when they feel that they need to attack, there's no guarantee. They were the ones that broke the ceasefire after things had been sorted out between Hamas and the Israelis. They were the ones that pushed for not only the bombing of Iran, but also for the US to get involved. So if the Israelis feel so motivated, I'm not convinced that they would necessarily feel that we should stop.
Let's dig a bit behind it, Michael. What sparked all of this in the first place, Ram? Because a lot of people are wondering, where did this come out of? This wasn't what we expected. Did we think Israel would get involved in this? And was there a need? What was the story behind all of this?
So Syria is a country that has, most people would think just Muslims, but of course there are an awful lot of minorities. There's the Alawites, and of course Bashar al-Assad, who was ousted recently, and his father, who came into power in 1970, they were part of the Alawites, which are a minority. And then there is about 10% Christian in the country. Of course, there's Sunni and Shia. And then you also have the Druze. The Druze are in the south, in Sweda, in this province in the southern part of Syria. And they represent about 3%. There's about 700,000 Druze in Syria. Now, what's also interesting, and this is one of the reasons why I think the Israelis got involved, is that, so Israel in 1967 occupied and continues to occupy the Golan Heights. Israel says it's theirs. The international community says Israel is occupying the Golan Heights. Now, there are about 50,000 Druze, as well as some Israeli Jewish settlers in the Golan Heights. In the south of Syria, of course, that's the stronghold of the Druze community. And I think Prime Minister Netanyahu is concerned that if he has Druze on his side, and some of whom have already crossed the border into Syria, and he also has, there are also Druze in the southern part of Syria, I wonder if part of his concern is that you could have these two communities coming together, creating havoc for the Israeli military. And I think the Israeli Air Force is strong enough to bomb. I don't know that the Israeli military has enough boots on the ground, because I think they're so preoccupied right now with what's going on in Gaza. So I think the Prime Minister has an awful lot that he's juggling at the moment, trying to make sure that the Druze who are in Israel stay in Israel, and the Druze who are in Syria stay in Syria. I don't believe that he is truly trying to protect a community in Syria.
Well, it certainly caused some upset within Syria and unstabilized things there as well. Earlier, I spoke to the former ambassador to the Arab League, Gayeth Armanazi, who explained how the situation could unstabilize things even further in Syria. Take a listen.
If we try to light the fire of division and sectarianism and ethnic problems and difficulties, then there's no end to that. We should be looking at the future for all Syrians, to be looking at a process of inclusion that involves them all. And the government has a challenge, I have to say, to maintain and emphasize that inclusion, an inclusion that reflects the diversity and the positive diversity of Syrian society, as I see it.
Possible for that to happen, do you think, or are we quite away?
Yes,
okay, because
yes, examples of the past actually are quite important. The French, when they took over the governance of Syria 100 years ago, actually established 5 or 6 different little statelets in Syria, including a statelet for the Jews. That didn't last long because it was resisted by the very components of Syrian society that we see today trying to mend their fences and trying to mold into one society. Diverse society, yes, but a society that can work together positively.
That's Gayeth Armanazi, who is the former ambassador to the Arab League that we spoke to earlier on. Gemma, if Syria need to, can they fight back, is the big question that I think everyone wants to know.
I think there is definitely some capability there, not on a large scale, but if they wanted to fire off a few rockets in retaliation, I'm sure there's the capability there. I think what's important to remember is that Israel's strike is strategic. Obviously, when Bashir left the country, last year, Israel launched a series of, I think it was over like 400 military sites that they hit in the space of 48 hours. To try and ensure Syria was weakened and to stay weakened. And so this isn't just a strike on the Ministry of Defense or a show of force, it's trying to further weaken the infrastructure. Because remember, Israel did not want the sanctions lifted against Syria, so they're still very much of that mindset.
And Israel Katz as well on the way to meet Hegseth in Washington, so the US have been enlisted to help as well here. Michael, are they going to now play powerhouse here and also trade and broker some sort of a deal? Is that the plan?
I think they're going to have to, because you've had close to 200 targets that have been hit in Syria by the Israelis. Now, what happens, hypothetically, if Syria, and you would think that they're fully within their rights to do this, but what if they were to retaliate? What happens if Syria fires missiles into Israel, and will the U.S. be in a position where they can come to the defense of Syria? Will they say they had that right? No, I think it's a long game, and it's something that Prime Minister Netanyahu is so good at doing, which is the art of misdirection. So he has all of these missiles that have gone into Syria. I'm sure that the Americans are speaking to the Syrians saying, please do not retaliate. Because if they retaliate, the Americans are now going to have to side with the Israelis. And as Gemma said, the Israelis did not want Donald Trump to acknowledge or meet with the new president. And they did not want the Americans to lift the sanctions. So if the Syrians attack the Israelis, then the Israelis will have the Americans back in their corner, and they will have achieved exactly what it is that they wanted to achieve, because they are fearful that you have a former Islamist who is the president of the country, and this is exactly what they don't want.
Well, as we mentioned, Marco Rubio had posted saying all sides agreed to end the conflict by Wednesday night. This story is developing minute by minute, so we will try and keep you updated on that. Both Gemma and Michael, thank you so much for your thoughts. Let's move on to our next story. Indonesia is hailing a brand new era of trade relations with the US after the two countries reached a deal on tariffs that will see them reduced from the proposed rate on goods from the Southeast Asian nation to 19%, down from 32% previously. Now, this deal is among only a handful of agreements that have been reached by the Trump administration ahead of that all-important August 1st deadline for negotiations. Indonesia says it came about only after, quote, an extraordinary struggle in negotiations. Patrick Falk has more details.
Well, taking to Instagram, Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto said he had a very good call with US President Donald Trump, and that the two together concluded to take their trade relations between the two countries into a new era of mutual benefit. Indonesia is Southeast Asia's largest economy. Countries in the region have been slapped with some of the highest tariff rates proposed by Washington. So in that sense, there has been impetus for both sides to get deals over the line, as it were, before that August 1st deadline. That rate reduction came with a series of sweeteners as well. President Trump said Indonesia had agreed to raise all duties on US imports and buy more than $19 billion of goods from the US, as well as 50 Boeing jets. According to the US, Indonesia ran a goods trade surplus of about $18 billion with the US last year. Experts say the breakthrough provides some relief for Indonesia. Speaking to reporters in Jakarta, here's what President Prabowo had to say.
We have calculated and discussed everything. The most important thing is that I have to protect all of our workers. Although we stand with our offers and we couldn't offer more than this, the most important thing is our workers are safe. I am very optimistic that our economy is strong and in good condition.
Now, there are still various details on the deal that seem to be missing for the time being, such as the timing of purchases. The deal is, as we see it now, a slightly better one than the 20% struck with Vietnam. Indonesia and Vietnam are both key markets for the transshipment of goods from China. President Trump said that their agreement would include a penalty for goods coming from China Overall, though, the rate is a sharp increase from the 5% average US tariff on Indonesian goods in 2024, according to Bloomberg findings. And it's estimated that the country could still lose 25% of its exports to the US in the medium term. As has been the case with other deals, there are still details that need to be negotiated further down the line. President Prabowo has indicated this will be ongoing, but it does also raise questions as to how concrete these arrangements are exactly.
Prince Harry has travelled to Angola this week to endorse the work of the Halo Trust, which is the landmining charity he's the patron of. The visit comes 28 years after his mother, Princess Diana, famously walked through a minefield in the southern African country, which had also been cleared by the same charity. Michael, Prince Harry, following in the footsteps of his mother, Princess Diana, what do we know about this particular visit that he's currently on?
So 100% Halo Trust, worthwhile cause, doing great work. Just last month, they marked the 300th mine that they had cleared in Sri Lanka as a result of the civil war that country had gone through. They've been in Angola trying to clear the mines there. The estimate is that there are about 1,000 mines that need to be cleared, the equivalent of 26 square miles. But it is great work that the Halo Trust does. As you said, Prince Harry's mother in 1997 was in Angola, and then in 2019, Prince Harry did the same walk as his mother did, and now he's back again. I think, putting my journalist hat on, which means a little bit of the cynicism, I think that it's a bit of a PR move on his part. I also think that when you do something that is very much in the same footsteps as your beloved mother, I think that that's also going to help in the PR world. I think when you visit an African country, I think that slides under the radar, so there's not too much attention. And I also think that that polarizing figure in his life, his wife, she's not there. I think that also adds to maybe him trying to step back into the forefront of some of the work that he does.
There might be a very good reason for that. And Gemma, I think that they have given us a reason, saying here's why Meghan is not involved in this current trip, right?
Yeah, well, no one said it directly, but we're hearing from sources. But in my opinion, these are quite reliable sources, to be honest with you. They're saying that Harry decided it was too dangerous for Meghan to join him in Angola. And the Duke won't let his wife go to England over security concerns, so there was no chance he'd allow her to go to Angola to walk across landmines. A lot of very protective language in there. He'd allow her, though, as kind of, I'm not really keen on that, because with absolute full respect to this couple, it's very clear that Meghan is in charge in this relationship. So I don't think there's any allowing Meghan to do anything. I think this is a woman who, if she wants to go and do something, she would. But I do agree that I think Harry wanted to do this trip by himself. I've found that Harry has been a bit lost. We've seen Meghan absolutely thriving outside of the royal family, because she was only really in the royal family for a very short time, whereas Harry obviously spent his whole life in it. So his transition into the real world has been absolutely, eye-opening for him, whereas Meghan's always lived in the real world. I think what we've seen as well, we've seen a lot of coverage of William and Kate lately. We had the Macron state visit to the UK, where they were hosted at Windsor Castle, lots of pomp and ceremony. And we've also had a Wimbledon, where Kate, everyone stood up and cheered. She's very, very beloved as a public figure. And so we don't like to think of Harry in this way, but there would naturally be jealousy that you're not making the same kind of headlines or the same kind of newspaper covers that you used to. And so he's clearly thought, it's my turn to step into the spotlight again.
Is he really jealous, though? I mean, is he not living his own life? He's in LA. He's set up a business for himself there, so to speak. They are an enterprise, him and his wife. And as you said, I think, and rightly so, she is turning coin quite rapidly there. Is it safe to say he's jealous, or he's gone on a different path?
I think because especially in the UK, as a nation, we're quite protective of Prince Harry. He's the spare. He's the little boy who walked behind his mother's, coffin on the gun carriage. There's still a lot of people who have this idea of him as this innocent little boy. He's a grown man. So him and William have always had a rivalry between them, even though Harry's always known his place in the food chain. But as well, Meghan, the Netflix show, the products that she's launching, which are just absolutely selling out within minutes, she is the one making all of the headlines. And Harry just seems quite lost. So yeah, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility to think that he is jealous and he would like to see his name in the headlines again.
Michael, we saw at the weekend as well, representatives from Harry and Meghan who met with King Charles's aides. Now this was covert, we didn't know that this was happening. We've seen pictures of that. Do you think, and this is only in a personal question, is he trying to get back into the fold of the royal family once again?
I don't know about that, but I agree with Gemma that he's lost. And I think that there comes a time when any person's life, male or female, where you start to wonder, what is my purpose? And I have this conversation with my children on a regular basis. And some of the most successful artists in the world are still plying their trade, even though they don't need to. I'm a big Springsteen fan. He's in his early 70s. He still goes out on tour. He talks about, my job is to write, it's to entertain, it's to tell stories about the American that I know. And this is, I think, something that he recognizes as his job. And I wonder if Prince Harry is, to your point, if he's lost, if he's struggling to try and find his place in the world, and what is it that he can do to contribute? And I think it's one of the reasons why we do feel for Prince Harry, because it's something we can all relate to, which is, what is my purpose? What am I good at? And what do I want to keep doing?
I mean, arguably it happened for King Charles as well, when he was Prince Charles, and we saw this massive sway in public emotion, as we'd seen many times over the 70-year reign of Queen Elizabeth II as well, a sway towards public dislike, towards public love for this figure. And King Charles had this as well when we had the whole controversy with the divorce, then we had the death of Princess Diana, we have had ups and downs in the remarrying of Camilla Parker Bowles as well. He's gone through a similar situation, and arguably one might say he won the war on that, because he's come out the other side as a different character.
I think we forget how hated the royal family were after Diana died. The feeling in the country, I mean, hate is a strong word, but it was definitely there. There was no support for them whatsoever, because they were epitomising the notion of stiff upper lip. But yeah, Charles is now seen as the cuddly granddad, and obviously his, recent bout of cancer has obviously softened people's attitudes towards him even further. But yeah, I do think there's a lot of goodwill for Harry. There really is. But at the moment, he's only really got the Invictus Games, which is a very worthy, thing to be involved with, of course. But that's once a year, and you are wondering what he is doing with himself the rest of the year in that big Montecito home. He's not launching any businesses the way Meghan is. He's not, moving into the influencer sphere the way she is. He doesn't have anything to do. And
I don't think you can. And certainly if you want to be taken seriously as a working member of the royal family at some stage again in your life, you can't go into the realms of what has happened with Meghan. It's impossible. Would you like to see him welcome back into the fold? Would you like to see him regain the title of prince, become a working royal and take some of the burden? Because now we know the burden of ours that the royal family have to have public engagements is huge.
I don't ever think we'll see them come back into the royal family.
Why?
I think that ship has sailed. Because they wanted to have their cake and eat it. They wanted to be half in and half out. And they expressed a lot of indignation and shock that they couldn't avail of taxpayers' money and do all their charity work, but also be making private money on the side. And I do not believe the UK taxpayers would have stood for that at all. I think if he is going to come back into the fold, it will be making up with his father. Do I think him and William will ever make up? I absolutely do not. I think there is so much bad feeling there that I think they're never going to reconcile.
But I do think with any family, there's always a rift and there's always somebody who's seen as the pariah of the family for whatever reason. They can make their way back into the family once again. They can weasel their way back in somehow. Michael, do you think it's possible?
So I'm going to steal something that Gemma said before we got on camera, and I think that you and I are both married, so we can understand this, which is that if the wives don't get along, and that might be a sticking point. So the brothers, yes, I'm sure that if it was just the two of them and they were going on a guy's trip, I think they could probably bond together. But I think if they're going to do family royal responsibilities / duties, I think that means that the spouses are there, and that adds a different element where they're both strong, independent, well-educated, well-experienced women.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they necessarily would want to fit into that mold that some of the expectation is that the spouse might fit into.
Yeah, of course, we should add, just speculation that we're saying this, but I think if we had a dad and lads weekend away somewhere, I don't know, Benidorm or wherever, I think they could probably mend things over. Who knows? We might see him back into the fold once again.
But then it would change once they came back to reality and they are sitting down talking to their wife.
Yes.
And that's when the wife would then share her opinion. And that's when I think some of the tension might develop again.
And it's very subtle in these relationships. All it takes is one look. All it takes is one word inflection, and all bets can be off. So it's very nuanced, these kind of relationships.
Families in general.
Families
I think
in
we
general.
can just copy the names from what we've just discussed with any family, and I think you'd have the exact same outcome as well. Finally, we've reached the part of the show where Gemma and Michael both brought to the table something that is quirky stories of the day. First of all, Gemma, yours is about a divisive enough issue. Splitting the bill at restaurant. What's going on?
I do feel that this is something everyone has an opinion on. So in Mallorca, they have got so tired of people coming to their restaurants and wanting to split the bill at the end that they've instigated a one bill per table. This comes from the Restaurants Association of Mallorca. One bill per table. So this is when you say there's a big group of people at dinner, and when the bill comes round, they're all saying, well, I'm going to pay for the green salad and the sparkling water because that's all I had. As opposed to everyone splitting the bill, or, if someone did have something cheaper, that's great. But the restaurant associations say that it's too much work for their staff. They say that obviously English isn't their staff's first language when it comes to big groups of tourists, kind of complicating. They're saying that people are getting away with not paying for things because if there's a list of, say, 25 food items and the server is trying to juggle, who had what, that people are getting away with not paying as well. Yeah, it's a very divisive attitude. I personally think that restaurants need to move with what their diners want. We've heard from the hospitality industry ever since COVID that the industry is still struggling. Also, there's the cost of living crisis. People are not going out to eat as much as they used to. So I sort of think, well, if your customers want to pay like that, then perhaps you should allow it. But I also understand that it is quite a pain.
But I think one of the things that we got from COVID that I love is that you can have interaction-less ordering these days. You can scan a QR code on your table. You can order the items.
Do you like that? Do you like not having the interaction?
Michael will agree with me on this. Personally enjoy it.
Right,
Depending,
okay.
if you're at a fine dining restaurant, obviously slightly different, but you still could split the bill.
Yeah.
And they'll happily do that for you through an app or other means. Is that the way every restaurant maybe needs to go, do you think, Michael?
I think that restaurants do need to adapt, but I also think, long gone are the days where the customer is always right.
Yeah.
And I think that if a restaurant decides to institute this policy, then so be it. I also think that it shouldn't be that big of a responsibility for the party of 6 or 10 or 12 to look at the bill and then to come up with that amount themselves.
Yeah.
And then to figure out, okay, we'll sort it out, but we shouldn't involve you.
Yeah.
Here is the amount that you've requested.
Yeah.
How we got that sorted is up
We've all
to
got
us.
calculators on our phones.
Yes.
It's very
exactly.
easy.
How to indulge properly. I will give you a quick tip on this one. I only found this out last week. You can take a picture of your bill, put it into ChatGPT, and then you can say basically what everyone had. It will split it down for you, main, starters, whatever, and you can decide on, it'll tell you exactly how much each person owes, broke down on what they actually ordered.
That is insane.
So
another use for ChatGPT. Couldn't do it today though because ChatGPT was down for many users across the globe. Michael, you found a story about a rather large infestation. This is what I think is actually sad news in Hungary.
So the drugstore beetle has become an issue in this. It's an abbey that's in a monastery that's in Hungary. And this monastery was established in 996. And they have 400,000 books. And 100,000 books are dealing with this beetle infestation. And what they're doing is they're going to be taking all of these books off the shelves, putting them in crates, and then putting these crates in hermetically sealed plastic sacks. And they're hoping that the pure nitrogen that will be in the bag, minus the oxygen, will actually kill the beetles, and then hopefully the books will be able to be repaired and put back on the shelves.
But it's devastating to see this because goodness knows how many priceless pieces are in there book-wise that have been devastated, and from someone who's previously dealt with a beetle infestation, those things are impossible to get rid of. So it's devastating to see that.
Well, the Beatles are just trying to, have a little read in private.
Clearly. Ringo is always my favourite. That is unfortunately all that we've got time for today. Thank you so much to our guests, to Managing Director of This Is Dubai, Michael Jabry Picket, and to columnist and correspondent Gemma White. Thank you both so much. Don't forget, as always, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can follow us on X, and G&T with Tom Burgess Watson is on the way next. Goodbye.